Dr. William Cheung from the University of East Anglia and the Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science. I guess you arrived yesterday?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, how do you enjoy Sweden and Stockholm so far?
Very good. Yeah, it's very beautiful city, and yeah, the weather is beautiful, so yeah. I enjoyed so far. Very good.
Good start. Dr. Cheung will speak about the observed present and potential future response of marine ecosystems to a changing climate and fisheries.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. First of all, thank you for the organizer, Sida, to invite me to come to participate and speak in this event. So it's very good to have the previous two speakers giving a very interesting and thorough introduction of description of the potential impact of the existing impacts of climate change in the oceans. So for me, I will focus on talking about what is the implication of those changes on marine ecosystem and fisheries. Particularly, I will focus on groups of marine organisms that are maybe most familiar to you: fishes and shellfish and invertebrates, where you can buy in the your fish market. So first of all, I want to stress that climate change is not the only impacts in the oceans. Currently, the ocean is already experiencing a lot of different impacts from human activities: overfishing, habitat destruction, pollution. All of this is having a tremendous impact on a lot of on the global oceans. And recently, we recognize that climate change is going to have a big effect in the oceans too. The previous two speakers has talked about the various pathways of which climate change will affect ocean conditions. And all of these will affect organisms in the oceans. For example, it will change primary productivities. For example, ocean acidification will change, may affect the growth and physiology of planktons. And at the end, it will affect the behavior, the biology, and the ecologies of fish and shellfish, where which we provide us with fisheries products. And all of these would affect a variety of marine ecosystems from the oceans that we are enjoying, including fisheries. So these are some of the things that the previous two speakers have talked about. These are the key biophysical effects of climate change in the oceans. These include climate change related to ocean warming, change in ocean current patterns, change in salinity patterns, change in ocean acidification. There will be a reduction in Arctic sea ice, so I'm not going to talk about this in further details. What I want to focus in this talk is what are the implications of all these changes on the marine ecosystem, and particularly on fishes and shellfish. Currently, we know that the change in ocean conditions will have an effect of change in the habitats of these animals, change in primary productivities, and change in the phenology, which is the seasonality or timing of some of the biological or ecological events. Some of the events, say the booming of the phytoplanktons, may happen earlier because of the warming of the ocean. It will also change growth of the animals, the life history, the life cycle of the animals. Also, it will change the distributions, the abundance, and of the marine animals, and the community structure. So what exactly are these changes? I'm going to show you some of the existing knowledge that we have on the potential impacts of climate change on marine animals. So imagine that, first of all, I can see. Yeah, so this white area is where we know that the, say, a cod or any fish species live in the oceans. The vertical axis here is the latitude, so the higher it is, the further, say in here, is further north it is, or in the southern hemisphere, like in Australia. You can imagine this is further south. And this is depth, so the further you go to the left-hand side of my side, then it is deeper in the water. And it is expected that with climate change, the ocean is going to get warmer, more acidic. And also, there's one thing that people start to realize is that with the warming ocean, the oxygen content in the ocean actually may is also going to be reduced. There are large areas in the oceans where scientists have projected that there will be an expansion of the so-called oxygen minimum zone, where oxygen is become lower. And you know that many of the marine organisms, like fish and invertebrates, they depend on the dissolved oxygen in the waters for respiration. So hypoxia or expansion of oxygen minimum zone will have a big impact on them. And also with habitat change. So we know that this will have an impact on the distribution of a species. So we know that with warmer waters, species will move to cooler waters, generally towards cooler waters near to the pole. It will also move to deeper waters, where generally water temperature is cooler. At the same time, there will be change in terms of the abundance and growth of the animals because of the change in chemistry of the water. This will lead to invasions of a species where it previously doesn't occur, or local extinction of a species where it previously occurred. Besides, there may be considerable geopolitical implications. If this is an important fish stocks, in this case, country A will gain in having more of this fish, while country B will lose in terms of the loss in potential catch. There may also be implications for conservations. For example, such shift in distributions or abundance may affect the effectiveness of a certain protected area which targets to protect this particular species. So this is the theory. What evidence we have so far? For change in species distribution, there are increasing amounts of evidence that scientists gathered on the historical change in species distributions that are correlated to change in ocean conditions. One of the well-known examples is the fish species in the North Sea. This is a paper in Nature in 2005, which shows that many species of fish in the North Sea have shifted latitudinally towards the North Pole. Some of the examples include cod, anglerfish, and stick bany. And the shift in the latitudinal range of the distribution is strongly correlated with water temperature. Besides, Nick-Dovey in 2008 also shows that the fish, besides shifting towards the pole, they also shift towards deeper water in the North Sea. And in fact, this is not only restricted to North Sea. Recent evidence shows that such shift in distribution also occurred in the coast of the USA, Canada, Australia, and probably we know it occurs in this area because this area have the most scientific data. And anecdotal evidence also shows that such things happens in other parts of the world too. So, and this will lead to such shift in distribution will lead to change in community structure. For example, recent studies by Fordietz in shows that in northern Gulf of Mexico, which is the east coast of southeast coast of America, they compare the number of species that scientists observed in the 1970s with those species that we observe nowadays. It shows that 30 species found in the scientific surveys in the 1970s can no longer be found nowadays, while 21 species that have been previously unrecorded can now be recorded. And they find that there is a significant relationship in terms of the associations of these species to whether it is a warmer water species or colder water species. In general, the papier species generally have a northern distribution, while the newly discovered species generally have a southern distribution. And in terms of the geopolitical implications, I mean, I was watching BBC this morning, and there was again a discussion about negotiation about the mackerels, which they call it the mackerel war, where countries like Iceland, Faroe Islands, they expect that climate change will lead to the shift in the macro distribution towards the water. So they propose an increase in quotas, while the southern nations such as Scotland and Britain become furious about that because they, in that case, they will lose a share of their quota. So these are things that had happened in the past. What about the future? So we built, my colleagues and I built computer simulation models to study what may happen in the future in terms of these changes. So we studied, we used outputs from the climate modelers on how ocean conditions would change, and then we modeled that with the global fish and invertebrate stocks. So basically, we look at a scenario where which is called the A1B. Basically, it is now considered a more optimistic scenario. So this is one of the results that we obtained. This is the original distribution of Atlantic cod on the left-hand side, and this is the projected cod distribution in the 50 years' time. Red means high distribution. So you can see that our simulations shows that in the next 50 years, the cod distribution will continue to shift towards the pole, with wet areas move further to high latitude region. This doesn't restrict it to cod. In, say, area like in China, where the small yellow croaker is a commercially important species, similar things happened. Distribution moved towards Japan and Korea. So, by combining all these distributions, we projected that based on over 1,000 species that we study in the world, there will be a lot of species moving towards high latitude regions, which is indicated by the red color here. At the same time, because of the movement of the species, areas such as the tropics will suffer quite a high rate of local extinction because the species is moving away from that area. Okay. And then what we then try to look at is how these changes in distribution and primary productivity in the oceans would affect the potential catch that fishermen can get from the ocean. So we use our model projections to do some calculations. And this is a projected change in potential catch by 50 years time later. By 2050, red area means that there will be a substantial reduction in potential catch. So fishermen over this area is likely to get a loss, while blue means an increase in catch potential. One thing that you can clearly see that is that the potential loss in catch potentials concentrates along the tropics, where countries are generally more of a developing nations, and where capacity to respond to a lot of these impacts is less compared to the high latitude regions. So this is a breakdown by a change in catch potential by countries. You can see that high latitude countries like Norway, Greenland, what we projected is that they may have a gain in catch potential because of the shift in species distributions. While a lot of the southern nations will have loss in catch potential. For example, in Indonesia or West African countries, they may have an average loss of up to 30% in catch potential by 2050 comparing to now. So 30% is quite substantial catch reductions. And if we look at further at the West African nations, you can see that most of the nations here, they have a red color indication of loss in catch potential. And if you look at this color scale, red color means from 20 to 40% reduction in catch potential. And in these regions, like the Ivory Coast, Ghana, may actually be suffered the most in this region. So how about the acidifications? The previous speakers talked about the large implications of ocean acidifications. We also try to look at that. We find that if we, by excluding or including ocean acidification in our calculations, there may be a 20 to 30% change in the catch potential, which means that by increasing, by projected ocean acidifications, catch potential may further reduce from our projection by 20 to 30%. So there's quite a scary numbers. So countries that may project to gain in our previous projections may actually be losing if we include ocean acidification in our calculation. And besides that, we projected that fish is also getting smaller because of the change in life history and the physiology of the animals. We projected under these scenarios, there may be a 20 to 40% reduction in mean body weight of the populations. So we are not only getting less fish in many of the countries, but we are also getting smaller fish. How about economics? We try to calculate the expected change in landed values by adding price into the calculations. Basically, we find that most of the countries, most of the region will have a quite substantial loss in the potential values of the fisheries. And for the developing countries, it may lose by $10 to $20 billion in our projections. So we try to use our projections to calculate what is the cost of adapting to this. So we come up with an idea. We call it the endowment cost. So we know that by 2050, there may be a 10 to billion annual loss of landed values because of climate change. So how much money we have to put in the bank in order to cover these costs, this lost landed value? So my colleagues and I did a small calculation for that. And we find that particularly for developing countries, well, globally, that we may need around 400 to 900 billion dollars to put in the bank now in order to cover the loss by 2050. And for developing countries, we may need around 200 to 400 billion dollars to do that. So it's not a substantial number, but the message is that if we do this later in time, so 5 years or 10 years later, there will be a substantial increase in this cost. So the earlier we do this, the less money we need to invest in this. So in summary, basically all the empirical evidence and model simulations shows that climate change will have a large impact on marine ecosystems and fisheries. And all our calculations shows that the tropics seems to be amongst the most severely affected regions. And many of the fisheries in these regions are projected to be seriously affected through reduction in catch potentials and shift in distributions. And the tropical countries, which are mostly severely affected, many of them are developing countries, which often have less capacity to adapt to this change. Dr. Ellison, I think in his talk, he will talk more about the vulnerability on and adaptive capacity of these of various countries in the world to climate change impacts on fisheries. And we also suggested that perhaps putting an endowment funds to cover these potential loss in landed values may be one way that we can help to some of these countries to adapt to the potential economic loss because of climate change. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. As a meteorologist, I'm fully aware of the different uncertainties when it comes to climate models and even weather forecasts. But what are the main uncertainties in your projections?
Yeah, there are several main uncertainties in that, for example, we didn't account for the interaction between species, which we only look at species by species, and there are some uncertainties in the projections of how the ocean conditions would change, because they are also model projections. But in general, and most of my colleagues who look at this study, the exact numbers, we know that it is uncertain, so whether it is 20% or 25%, but most of them would agree the general trends that we shows. For example, how shift in distributions, the change in in body size of the animals, and a lot of these changes match with what we are actually observing in the last several decades already. So I would say that the more detailed numerical projections is uncertain, while the trends is there is is quite very robust of the trends that we show here.
Okay, thank you very much. William will be with us during the afternoon panel discussion as well, and you will have the time to ask him a few more questions then. So, thank you very much.